I sat silently at my ex-wife's wedding, exposed her groom's dark past with one envelope, collapsed the ceremony, and reclaimed my power in silence. She left me with a post-it note and a reheated lasagna. That was it. No dramatic confrontation, no tears, just her handwriting. You'll find someone who matches your rhythm someday. I need fireworks. And next to it, a casserole dish that still had the aluminum foil from the night before. That was 4 years ago. And now I'm holding a hand-addressed wedding invitation with gold-embossed lettering that reads, Naomi Carter and Eric Malden request the honor of your presence. My name's on the please reply line, like she's inviting me to a book club instead of the ceremonial unveiling of her new life. She wants me to see her wearing white again. Wants me to sit in the back pew and marvel at what she traded up to. What she doesn't know is this isn't her stage anymore. I filled out the reply card and checked gladly attending. No +1. Didn't need a distraction. See, Naomi always thought silence meant weakness, that walking away without slamming the door made me boring. But silence has gravity. It makes people lean in, try to fill it. She'll find that out soon enough. I booked a flight under my middle name, rented a car 2 towns over, even picked up a new pair of shoes, though I'll be damned if I break them in before the big day. She built the stage. I'll let her take center spotlight. It's funny. She always hated how I folded my shirts, said I was obsessed with neatness, but she left the house in a hurry that day. Didn't notice the storage unit key tucked inside her old jewelry box, or the ledger I'd moved to the garage, or the backup drives labeled as 2012 taxes that weren't taxes at all. That key became the first step. The second, a name, Eric Malden, young, ambitious founder of some tech startup that sells empathy, tracking software to HR departments. Oh, and charming. The kind of charming that makes your mother flirt and your best friend raise an eyebrow. They got engaged within 18 months. She posted it with the caption, took a leap, fell into something real. I printed it, framed it, not out of heartbreak, but precision. I don't keep grudges. I catalog them. What Naomi didn't know, and likely still doesn't, is that her groom's father and I once stood across from each other in a federal courtroom. Different suits, same silence. And I remember the way he looked down when the verdict came. That little twitch in his jaw, that moment of recognition, of being caught. Now he's walking his son down the aisle. I land 2 days before the wedding. Small town, historic church, brick and ivy. I drive past the venue once. Then again, no one notices. Naomi wouldn't expect me to show. She likely sent that invitation assuming I'd ignore it. Or maybe she hoped I'd come crawling, awash in regret. Either way, she miscalculated. I check into a motel. 2nd floor, no view. Pull the curtains tight, iron my shirt, lay out the sealed envelope I brought in my jacket's inner lining. A copy of the exact document her soon-to-be father-in-law never thought would resurface. Signed, notarized, forgotten by most, but not me. I sleep like a soldier on recon, shallow, ready, surgical. Morning arrives. I dress slowly, no tie, crisp cuffs, pocket square that matches the exact shade of her wedding invitations. Let's call it performative, closure beige. Then I drive, park 3 blocks away, walk the rest, calm as a Sunday storm. They say revenge is best served cold. They're wrong. Revenge is best served silent, like a man you thought was history quietly sitting in your audience watching Act 2 of your delusion play out with full knowledge that the final curtain belongs to him. Naomi didn't cry when she left. She smiled, that smug, satisfied little smile she used to wear after winning arguments she never really understood. She stood in the doorway wearing a silk blouse I'd never seen before, holding a Louis Vuitton suitcase that still had a gift tag on it. Hair curled, lips done. Not for me. You're too safe, Thomas, she said, like she was diagnosing a mild allergy. I want passion, not spreadsheets. I remember staring at her shoes, 4-inch heels. She always said they hurt her arches, but I guess excitement makes a woman bulletproof. She didn't slam the door, just clicked it shut, like she was heading out to a spa weekend, not detonating a 17-year marriage. No affairs to confess, no yelling, just an exit. She moved in with Eric before the coffee maker had time to cool. A startup guy, mid-30s, all teeth and charisma. I saw a video of him speaking at some tech conference once, gesturing like a magician, selling something intangible to people desperate to believe in disruption. He made a joke about old-school management styles. Got a standing ovation. Naomi must have been in the audience, or maybe already in his hotel room. Hard to tell. I didn't fight, didn't call. Didn't post a cryptic quote about growth or healing on Facebook. I just deleted her contact, set my calendar on fire, and made a different kind of to-do list, a quiet one. Because here's the thing Naomi never understood. I don't make scenes. I make systems. She thought she erased me, but she only archived me. And now she's walking down a marble aisle in an overpriced dress on the arm of a man who once spent 3 months trying to sue the federal government into silence. A man whose name still lingers in sealed court transcripts. A man who in 2001 nearly lost everything because of a whistleblower who refused to be bought off. That whistleblower was me. Of course, Eric doesn't know that. Why would he? Men like that don't read history. They rewrite it with their dad's money and a PR team. But his father, oh, he remembers. We shared more than a courtroom. We shared a moment. One where he realized I wasn't a cog in someone else's machine. I was the machine. And now he's going to watch his son say, "I do," in front of the man who almost dismantled his empire. Fate's funny like that. The wedding venue is laughably grand. A restored cathedral in a town too small to justify marble lions at the gate. Naomi loves theatrics. I'm sure the guest list includes the Pilates friends, who told her she was glowing during the separation. Probably some crypto brothers. Maybe even her sister, who once drunkenly told me I was the best thing that ever happened to Naomi. But God, you're boring. She wasn't wrong. I was boring, until I wasn't. Until I pulled the pin. I arrive early. I always do. Efficiency is just controlled patience. I sit in the second-to-last pew. Perfect vantage. The stained glass casts amber light through the chapel, warm and biblical. Naomi probably thinks it flatters her complexion. The guests pour in like confetti, champagne laughter, handshakes with veiled envy, perfume and ego. It's all exactly what she always wanted, curated chaos that looks spontaneous. Then the doors open. She walks in like the star of a one-woman play, head high, smile calculated to hit every angle. The gown is over-designed, sculpted to look effortless. Classic Naomi. When the whispers die down, she locks eyes with Eric, and I swear I see it, that flicker of triumph. As if this moment proves she was right to leave. And for the briefest second, I let her believe it. Until Eric's father turns. He's seated front row, flanked by attorneys dressed like groomsmen. When his eyes meet mine, the color drains from his face like someone flipped a breaker inside him. No one else notices yet, but he does. And that's when the performance begins to unravel. Eric looked like the kind of man who thought his life was a screenplay. Button tucks, confident smile, that little head nod he gave the guests like he was the lead actor thanking extras. He stood tall at the altar, joking with the priest, soaking in the reverence that only comes when you believe you earned it. He hadn't. I arrived 37 minutes early, sat in the second-to-last pew, third seat from the aisle, predictable, forgettable. I could have been a cousin, from out of town, or a florist's husband. I wore a charcoal suit, no tie, pressed but plain. Something about looking like you belong makes people not question why you're there. The church filled slowly. Laughter echoed off the vaulted ceilings, blending with organ music. Guests were dressed to be noticed. Naomi's crowd always was. Old colleagues from her PR firm whispered in cliques. Some man with slicked hair pointed at me, then shrugged when he realized he didn't know me. Perfect. The bridesmaids strutted in like they were auditioning for something. Then Naomi appeared. The designer gown she wore had that modern bridal arrogance, white but smug about it. Sleeves sculpted, back exposed just enough to signal elegance and rebellion. She wasn't walking toward Eric. She was walking toward victory. Her little "I told you so" in human form. I watched her smile as the crowd turned. That slow, confident glide down the aisle. The subtle tug of her veil by a flower girl dressed in glittered obedience. And somewhere between steps 9 and 10, she looked over the guests, right past me. Didn't even flinch. Of course she didn't recognize me. That version of me no longer exists. But the man in the front row, he noticed. Eric's father, Charles Malden, was sitting with perfect posture. He held the wedding program, like it had stock tips printed on it. Next to him sat a woman I assumed was wife number 2, or possibly a very well-compensated assistant. Either way, she didn't matter. What mattered was the moment his eyes found mine and froze. I saw the twitch, the way the corner of his mouth dropped 0.5 millimeter, the subtle shake of his fingers as he tightened his grip on the program, as if holding it harder might hold back what was now charging at him from the past. He knew who I was. I watched the memory hit him like a shrapnel burst. Courtroom lights, the scrape of a chair, my voice under oath. The young engineer who had destroyed the offshore pipeline that fed his first fortune. The man who stood up to his fleet of lawyers and said, "No deal." His hand dropped the program. He stood, not quickly, slowly, deliberately, like his body was trying to stall his mind. Eric didn't notice at first. He was too busy grinning, waving at someone in the fourth row. Oblivious, Naomi glanced over, brow furrowing, one hand reflexively adjusting her neckline. Whispers started. Someone leaned toward Charles, but he didn't answer. He just took a step toward the aisle. And I sat still, back straight, no expression, letting it build, letting the fuse burn. Because the real tension doesn't come from chaos. It comes from silence that shouldn't be silent. And at that moment, every second felt like it was echoing. Eric's father turned and walked, not out, but toward the altar, straight to his son. You could practically hear the suction of air in the room when Charles leaned into Eric's ear and said something urgent. Not angry, not loud, just surgical. Eric's grin twitched, his brow furrowed. He blinked like a man trying to place a dream he didn't realize was a memory. Then he looked right at me. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw it, uncertainty, like a man who spent his whole life assuming the world was a stage built for him, suddenly realizing he doesn't know the script. Eric turned back to his father, whispered something. Charles shook his head, sharp, absolute, then pointed at me with two fingers fast and discreet like a field commander trying not to spook the troops. Naomi, halfway up the aisle now, stopped walking. "What is it?" she called out, half laughing, trying to keep the mood light. "What's going on?" No one answered. The organist hesitated, then stopped playing altogether. Guests turned like wheat in a breeze, one by one, toward the back of the room. Toward me, the anonymous man in the quiet pew. The shadow no one invited, but who RSVP'd anyway. Naomi's voice sharpened. "Eric!" He didn't answer her. The priest looked unsure whether to smile or bless someone. Then, in one clean motion, Eric handed his boutonniere to the nearest groomsman, stepped off the altar, and walked down the aisle toward me, shoes echoing on polished wood, eyes locked. You could feel it in the walls, tension, confusion, ego bruising itself on silence. The bridesmaids stiffened like mannequins. Naomi stood frozen, mouth slightly open, bouquet held like a weapon with nowhere to aim. Her left heel shifted reflexively, as if she was deciding whether to charge forward or bolt out the back. Eric stopped 3 feet from me. "You," he said. Not quite a question, not yet a statement. "Yes," I answered calmly. He looked back at his father, then at me. "Do we know each other?" I tilted my head, just a little, not yet. "But we've been circling the same fire." He flinched, like something about the wording struck a nerve. "What is this? What the hell are you doing here?" he asked. I reached inside my suit coat and pulled out the envelope, cream, sealed with wax, the old-fashioned way. "This," I said, offering it, "is for your father's eyes only. Read it privately. Then decide if you want to keep playing husband today." Eric didn't move, but Charles did. He stepped forward fast, snatched the envelope before Eric's fingers could touch it. Didn't say a word, just stared at me like a man who saw a ghost he thought he'd buried under concrete. I said nothing. He opened it right there, no back room, no discretion, just tore the seal and read. His face drained, pupils shrank. A vein pulsed on his forehead like a countdown. When he was done, he handed the papers to Eric slowly, reverently, like passing a detonator. Eric read in silence. Then he looked up, looked at Naomi, who still hadn't moved, still in that frozen statuesque pose she practiced for every wedding photo fantasy she ever had. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He just said, clearly enough for everyone in the church to hear, "You need to sit down." And the church, once again, went dead silent. Eric was shaking, not visibly, not dramatically. Just that subtle twitch men get when they realize the room they thought they controlled is suddenly wired with traps, and they're standing on all of them. He stared at me like a man trying to remember a stranger from a bad dream. "Do I know you?" he asked, voice firm, but his body betrayed him, hands clenched, shoulders pulled back just a little too far, like he was trying to stay upright on a boat that had just tilted hard left. I stood slowly, gave him the full view. "No," I said. "But your father does." Then I held out the envelope again, same wax seal, same slow gravity. "You'll want to open this privately, then decide if today is still your day." Eric glanced at his father, who was already storming forward. Charles snatched the envelope without a word, like it might detonate if I held it a second longer. His expression was familiar, that same corporate mask he wore in court 2 decades ago. Chiseled calm backed by panic. Eric hesitated. "What is this?" Charles didn't answer, just grabbed his son's arm and pulled him toward a small side room off the main hall. No words, no questions. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A woman coughed into her elbow. One of the groomsmen pulled out his phone, checked it, then thought better of it. The priest stood like someone had just handed him a live grenade wrapped in tulle. Naomi started moving. "He's not going in there without me," she said, trying to push forward. But the maid of honor, a redhead with a backbone I hadn't expected, blocked her path. Eric said privately, she said, tight-lipped. "Are you serious?" Naomi snapped. "I'm serious." Naomi stood frozen in the center aisle, hands trembling slightly now, bouquet held like a weapon with nowhere to aim. Her lips moved, but no words came, just confusion, dread, and that hint of anger she used to flash at me when I overthought things. 10 minutes passed like molasses. Every tick of the old church clock sounded like a countdown. And then the door opened. Eric stepped out first. His face looked wrong, colorless, hollow, like he had just learned gravity wasn't real. Behind him, Charles followed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he'd aged a decade in the span of a file folder. Eric didn't walk back to the altar. He didn't look at the priest. He walked straight to Naomi, slow and certain. The room waited. Naomi tried to smile. "Everything okay?" Eric stared at her for a beat then. In a voice quieter than anyone expected, but sharp enough to cut through every pew, he said, "You need to sit down." Gasps rippled. Naomi blinked. "What?" Eric looked away. He turned toward the guests, then toward the altar, and finally toward me, still standing in the back pew, silent as a headstone. And in that instant, he understood. Not the full weight, not yet. But he knew one thing for sure, this wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a reckoning. The envelope wasn't thick, but it was dense. Every page in it had been touched by time, by lawyers, by silence. You could smell the decade on it. Inside, court documents dated 1996. Case ID sealed. Plaintiff, United States Government. Defendant, Arcoset Holdings LLC. Nature of, securities fraud. Penalties, $4.2 million. Primary witness, Thomas B. Merrill, Junior Systems Engineer. Internal analyst testimony, damning. Back then, I was just a 29-year-old with a bad haircut and a functional conscience. I'd flagged an internal ledger that didn't make sense. Double-stacked vendor IDs, untraceable wire transfers, payout chains with no service logs. Brought it to my manager. He told me to let it go. I didn't. Instead, I escalated. And when it reached the partner level, that's when the walls started shifting. Suddenly, project deadlines disappeared, meetings were canceled, and I was being offered consulting work in Florida if I kept my mouth shut. I declined. Next came the subpoenas, the meetings in rented conference rooms, the quiet nods from government suits who never wore ties. I testified, and across from me, one row back from the defense team, sat Charles Malden, not named in the suit, not directly, just present, always present. One of those men who managed to exist in every room without ever signing anything. A silent partner, as they called it. No emails, no fingerprints. But everyone knew. I watched his empire shrink by millions that year, but not collapse. Because Charles did what people like him always do. He liquidated fast, rerouted assets, and distanced himself. Let the fall guy burn, then took the remainder and reinvested it into something smaller, leaner, untraceable. Something that later became Malden Metrics. His son Eric's beloved tech company, the one he brags about founding in a garage, never mentioning that the garage came with a $300,000 wire transfer 2 months before. That's what was in the envelope. Not just the transcripts, or the federal documents, or the clipped newspaper articles, but the confidential settlement agreement. The one that required silence in exchange for immunity. The one that Charles thought had been buried under 20 years of handshakes and shell corporations. The one with his name, his signature. The one that voids any legitimate claim to clean capital used in the founding of Malden Metrics. See, the prenup Naomi made Eric sign. So smug, so ironclad. It had a clause, one she probably didn't even understand, tucked away in the boilerplate language near the end. Any marital assets found to be materially linked to undisclosed, illegal, or fraudulent income sources, direct or indirect, shall be considered ineligible for community distribution in the event of separation. Translation: if the money that built Eric's world came from poisoned roots, Naomi gets nothing. And now, the roots are showing. Because my envelope didn't just contain the past, it contained the blueprint of the present and the collapse of their future. Eric read every page, and with each paragraph, the blood drained from his face. The company he loved was a lie. The money he lived on was compromised. The man who raised him was a criminal in Armani. And the woman standing in a designer dress, waiting for him to say, "I do," never once asked where any of it came from. She didn't want to know. She wanted excitement. And now she was about to get it, served in cold legal language, sealed in wax, and delivered by the man she left in silence. Me. Naomi always prided herself on being the smartest person in the room, especially when it came to money. The prenup. That was her masterpiece. She brought it up 6 weeks into her relationship with Eric, said it was just a formality, but made sure her friends knew she'd secured her future with a single document. The tone she used was always the same, sweet on the surface, but underneath a thin layer of contempt, the kind of tone you use when you think you're smarter than the man sleeping next to you. Eric didn't even flinch when she asked him to sign. He was in love, infatuated, maybe just drunk on the fact that someone like Naomi, sharp, older, elegant, wanted him. He signed it before brunch. What Naomi didn't know, I'd already read it. Because the lawyer she used, Glenn Halbrook, wasn't just a trusted estate professional in Westwood. He was also a man I once shared a windowless war room with during the Arcasette fallout. We'd reviewed hundreds of pages of ledger sheets together. Glenn knew the smell of dirty money before it even hit the paper. He owed me a favor. So, when Naomi contacted him, no doubt bragging that her boring ex was probably still clipping coupons, I made a call. And Glenn did something Naomi would never imagine a lawyer doing. He helped me strengthen her prenup against her. See, Naomi's draft was decent, solid on property rights, strong on alimony structure. But Glenn slid in a subtle, devastating clause under the section labeled Asset Origin and Disclosure. Legally so dry, most people wouldn't give it a second look. It read, "In the event that any assets, business holdings, or marital contributions are discovered to originate directly or indirectly from undisclosed, fraudulent, or criminal sources, the party uninformed of said origin shall retain full claim over separate holdings, and all community property designation shall be nullified." To Naomi, it sounded like protection from Eric. To Glenn and me, it was a detonator. Because now that the court records had resurfaced, tying the original seed capital of Malden Metrics to a fraud settlement, every dollar Eric brought into the marriage became suspect. Every joint purchase, every future investment, every luxury Naomi had mentally claimed as hers, gone. And because she had insisted on the prenup, she couldn't argue coercion, ignorance, or unfair negotiation. She built the vault. We just changed the lock. I watched her that day, standing there trying to keep her composure as Eric whispered something sharp in her ear. Her face twitched just a fraction, eyes narrowed, lips parted. She turned to Charles like maybe he could salvage it, but Charles was already defeated, his empire exposed, his son poisoned by the truth, his silence, once bought and buried, now just debris. Naomi stepped back. "This is ridiculous," she said, loud enough for the first two pews to hear. "It doesn't even matter. We're married in spirit. That's what counts." But even her voice cracked when she said it. Eric just looked at her. "You used to ask me what made me different," he said. "It was always the money, the energy, the edge, right?" Naomi nodded, careful now, like a fox realizing the trap was hers. He pointed at the envelope still lying on the nearby chair. "Well," he said, "that's what the edge looks like when it comes back." Naomi's shoulders dropped. For the first time, she looked small in that dress. Not radiant, not victorious, just cornered. Because all this time she thought she was dancing through someone else's story. She didn't realize I was the one writing the epilogue. The silence was the kind that grows teeth. Eric stood at the altar, shoulders tight, hands trembling just enough to betray him. He looked out at the guests, friends, colleagues, influencers, investors, people he'd invited to witness the apex of his life. But now they looked back at him like spectators at a crime scene. He cleared his throat. The priest shifted uneasily. "Shall we continue?" "No," Eric said. "Steady now. We're not getting married today." The words sliced through the room like a guillotine. Naomi gasped. A real one, not the performative kind she practiced in mirrors or used during boardroom dramatics. This one came from her ribs, a sharp, involuntary exhale of disbelief. "What?" she asked, stepping forward. "Eric, no. Whatever this is, we can fix it." He held up a hand. She stopped mid-step. The crowd murmured. One of Naomi's friends let out a little shriek giggle before realizing no one else was laughing. A groomsman coughed. The organist froze mid-chord. And I didn't say a word, didn't blink, didn't flinch, just stood and turned, walked calmly down the aisle as if the ceremony was over. Because it was. Naomi's voice chased me. "Thomas, what the hell did you do?" But she didn't follow. She couldn't. Not in those heels, not with that pride dragging behind her like a train. When I reached the back doors, I paused only once, to take one last look at the altar where she had once built her fantasy. Brick by delusion-filled brick. She had designed this whole production to be a final middle finger to our past, a performance of conquest, victory lap in ivory silk. Instead, it collapsed in silence. As I stepped outside, cool air greeted me like an accomplice. Then came the footsteps behind me. I didn't turn, I already knew. Charles Malden stood a few feet back, hands deep in his coat pockets, the envelope still clutched under one arm like a verdict. "You never forgot," he said. His voice wasn't mocking, not angry, just tired. That kind of tired men get when they realize the past doesn't fade. It calculates. I turned to him. "No," I replied. "But I forgave." He looked at me, eyes wet but unbroken. "To destroy them." I shook my head. "To close the book." And in truth, that's exactly what this was. Not revenge, not rage. I didn't come to gloat or shout or pull some cheap dramatic stunt. I came to turn the last page on a story that began the moment Naomi told me I was too safe. She mistook quiet for weak, mistook kindness for dullness. She thought the world belonged to people who shouted loudest, moved fastest, sparkled brightest. But power is knowing exactly when to speak and when to vanish. So I left, didn't look back, didn't wait for applause, just walked away as the church doors groaned shut behind me, sealing the wreckage inside. It wasn't my mess to clean anymore. It never really was. By Monday morning, Naomi's wedding had become a cautionary tale wrapped in designer lace. The first article appeared in a local lifestyle blog, "Runaway Groom at Whispering Pines." The wedding that wasn't. No names at first, just speculation, blurry photos, and a few too eager quotes from anonymous guests close to the couple. But within 48 hours, the story metastasized. An investor pulled out of Eric's next funding round. A luxury vendor posted a now-deleted TikTok rant. Some people think they can order $24,000 worth of floral chandeliers and vanish. Girl, we have receipts. That one got 500,000 views before breakfast. Naomi's Instagram, formerly a curated grid of brunch plates, skincare rituals, and cryptic affirmations, went dark. She'd spent the last year building a brand around her new life, a lifestyle coach for women who don't settle. She used to end her captions with #upgraded. Now people were commenting, "You got downgraded, sweetheart." Eric disappeared from the public eye. Word spread quietly at first that he'd fired his father as financial advisor and board consultant. The family trust that had once served as the backbone of Malden Metrics was being independently reviewed. Charles's name stopped appearing in press releases. And Naomi, she had already quit her job 6 months earlier. She liked to call herself retired, even though she was 41 and still carried student debt. She never mentioned to Eric that she was focused on curating their home, which really meant draining a joint account on monogrammed wine glasses and imported stone bathtubs. She'd moved out of her apartment before the wedding, let her lease expire, told her landlord she wouldn't need a backup plan. Now she was couch surfing with a friend from Pilates, begging to borrow her Amex just until the venue refund clears. Except the venue didn't refund. They sued, breach of contract, non-payment of deposits, emotional damages for the trauma inflicted on staff. And Naomi, despite all her airs, was not on the contract. Eric was, and Eric wasn't answering her calls anymore. Neither was Charles. She tried spinning it, it was mutual. We realized we were better off as friends. The timing just wasn't right. But the city's social circle has a memory like a shark, only moving forward, but never forgetting what it's already bitten. By Friday, she caved. She sent me a message. Just one line, no emojis, no punctuation. What did I ever do to you to deserve this? I stared at it. The gall to pretend she didn't know. That leaving me for a flashier man and flaunting it like a trophy wasn't enough. That mocking the life we built, Our quiet dinners, our spreadsheets, our Sunday routines wasn't enough. That inviting me to her wedding, not as closure, but as audience to her level up, wasn't enough. She knew. Of course she did. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Silence was what started all this. And silence would be what finished it. It was raining the last time she saw me. Not the cinematic kind, no thunder, no sweeping soundtrack. Just a steady drizzle soaking the sidewalks and softening the skyline. The kind of rain that makes people quieter, more careful. The kind of day where apologies feel easier, even when they're decades late. I was at the library cafe. Tuesdays were quiet there, old hardwood tables, overpriced espresso, and the low hum of pages turning. I liked it because no one asked questions. You could sit with your thoughts, and no one would interrupt them. Until she did. Thomas. Her voice was small, not the Naomi I remembered. Not the woman who once leaned over a balcony at our friend's engagement party and whispered that I wasn't built for greatness. This version stood in flat shoes and a rain-specked coat she probably never planned to be seen in. She sat down before I invited her. I didn't flinch, just closed the book in front of me and looked up. Her eyes were glassy, not from the rain. "I really did love you once," she said, fingers tightening around her purse like it might keep her anchored. I sipped my coffee. It had gone cold. "You loved the version of me you didn't understand," I said. She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means you fell in love with a mirror. And when I didn't reflect what you wanted anymore, you smashed it, called the pieces growth." She said nothing. "I was never the problem," I added. "You were just never patient enough to see the design." Naomi's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked tired, the kind of tired that no serum or spin class fixes. The kind that comes from realizing you bet your entire future on a facade and lost. "I wasn't trying to hurt you back then," she said quietly. "Doesn't mean you didn't," I replied. She looked down, tried to smile, but it came out warped. "You know, I thought if I built the perfect life, it would prove something. To you, to everyone." "It did," I said. "Just not what you think." I stood, left my half-finished coffee on the table. She didn't stop me, didn't plead, just sat there as I turned and walked toward the door. As I passed the window, I caught her reflection, still small, watching me go like the end of a movie she thought would turn out differently. She never saw me again, because I didn't need to yell, didn't need to rage or ruin or revenge. She ended my story once with a smirk and a suitcase. I ended hers with silence.